After several years of working on the design and even scrapping 2 designs and starting from scratch, the SS Brewtech SVBS is finally here. Full disclosure, as with all my videos, SS Brewtech did send me the unit for testing and review. They didn't ask me to see the video before I published it or ask me for any kind of good review or anything like that, so I just wanted to share that with you and be fully transparent. Now let's jump into the specs on it. It is a 240 volt unit only. There is no 120 volt version of it. It does have a 4600 watt halo element, and that would require a 30 amp GFCI circuit. You definitely want to make sure that you're ground fault protected with using this unit because, you know, water and electricity, they don't mix, as I always say. It does have a NEMA L630P plug. Now you can make an adapter like I have for plugging it into like a dryer outlet or something like that. I have a 30 amp protected outlet here in the basement brewery that I can use with this unit. The list price on it as of this video is $1,299, and that does not include the chiller. The chiller I think is like $100 or $200 extra, something like that. It is a 12 gallon or 45.4 liter unit. It's designed for 5.5 to 6 gallon batches, which would be 20.8 to 22.7 liters. The minimum grain bill is 8 pounds or 3.6 kilograms. And the maximum grain bill is 20 pounds or just over 9 kilos. They do provide Beersmith profiles, and because of the way the basket is designed and the kettle and all that, it does increase or decrease dead space when you have, you know, larger grain bills or whatever. So they have 2 profiles. I'll link to those down in the description below. I will also transfer those profiles over into Brew Hardware and provide them to the developers of Brew Hardware so that, you know, you can use that system with this system as well. Now, I do want to talk about the concept of it being an all-in-one. There are a lot of all-in-ones on the market that differ from this unit, and the reason being is that this unit actually has a serviceable element. Most of the other units out there, you know, the grain father, the mash and boil, the anvil, the grain father, all those do not have a serviceable element. So when you're comparing this system to those, you really can't do a direct comparison, because if the element dies on one of those, basically it's a whole new unit. With this unit, you can actually purchase a replacement for it and, you know, and keep on brewing once you get that replaced. I would say this is more of a direct comparison to like the Brew Tools, the Solo, the Brew Easy Compact. Even, I guess you probably could compare it even to the Clawhammer supply system. Now looking at the kettle, it has everything built into it. There is a recirculation valve, a whirlpool valve, and then what they call a knockout valve. Now, all 3 of these do kind of work in conjunction with the pump, so that as you open one or the other, the pump engages in the manifold and will, you know, output to whichever particular opening that you have selected in the valves. The mash basket is kind of a unique design. It has very fine holes in it, and they also came up with a catchment system that is a little bit different than any of the others. Most of the others have hooks and things on them. They have kind of like a bracket system that is actually inside of the kettle as well as on the basket itself. Does appear to be pretty sturdy as far as that goes. This whole unit, everything was packaged pretty well, and actually I did a live unboxing with my Patreons over there on the Patreon page, and we kind of went over all the packaging and everything of it. But suffice to say, it was packaged very well. Had a little bit of a dent in the box when I first got it, but, you know, it was one of those things where I opened it up and everything was fine. It was really well packaged, I will say that for sure. It does have a neoprene cover that goes over the entire unit, and I don't know if you could use this when you're mashing or whatever, or if you really even need to. It has a touchscreen controller, capacitive touch, with a 4-foot long cord on it, and it also has an M12 connector that connects into the back of the kettle. It also comes with a pump filter and gasket. Think of it kind of as a trub trapper or some kind of a ring to keep trub and all that stuff out of the pump area. And then it has a silicone seal that seals around the outside edges of the kettle when it's installed. It also comes with a lid that fits on both the mash basket as well as the kettle. And the nice thing about it is it does have the, you know, normal SS Brewtech removable notch for, you know, putting the lid on it whenever you're chilling down. So that's definitely a nice feature to have. The power cord is 4 foot long, and as I previously said earlier, it has a NEMA 630P outlet on the power side. As far as the kettle side, we'll get to that here in just a minute, but it has like kind of a proprietary, or I'm sure it's some kind of spec, but there's a little something you need to know on that, which I'll share with you here in just a little bit. If you're enjoying the video so far and you're finding it helpful and informative, do me a favor, hit that like button. It lets YouTube know that you really like the video and it helps push it out to other people. If you also want to see a full brew day on this system, I'm going to be doing that as well. So if you want to be notified whenever that goes live, Be sure to hit the subscribe button. I think it's over there. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to click the bell so you will be notified whenever that video goes up. It has a RIMS tube or recirculation tube that actually connects to the basket with a tri-clamp system at the bottom of the basket. And then it has a tube that goes up through the mash basket with a RIMS manifold or kind of a diffuser manifold on top of that. And then there's a plate that actually sticks down inside of that, which is supposed to diffuse your mash or your liquid as you're mashing. The grain is supposed to kind of just let everything go over top of the grain. It has a basket seal assembly, and that actually attaches in the bottom of the kettle. There's a tri-clamp in the bottom of the kettle, and that attaches there so that when you set the mash basket down in, it actually reaches the bottom of the kettle and hits that rubber seal, and then that's what actually makes the seal for the recirculation back up through the mash basket. Now, some details on the controller. As I said before, it is a capacitive touch controller. The first time you turn it on, I don't know if mine was particular or not, but it already came right up into the brewing configuration. You may want to go ahead and do a factory reset, and you can go into the menu, click the gear icon, and then there'll be a button in there for factory reset. Once I did the factory reset, it came up with some warnings, saying that it was electric, and be sure to be safe with that, and that the sides of the kettle are hot and all that stuff. Then at the end of that, those warnings, then it allows you to set up for Celsius or Fahrenheit. Then from there, there's a few features on the controller that are kind of cool. It does have some presets for the mash as well as the boil. And my unit, when I got it, it had like, 1%, 100%, and like 75% on the boil. Now, one of the things you can do, and they state this in the manual, is you can adjust the temperature based off of what you want your boil percentage or even your mash temperature to be. And then you simply push and hold on the preset that you want to set that temperature to, whatever the current temperature setting is. Hold it for about 3 seconds, and then it'll actually save that setting in there. So that might be something you want to do initially if you get the unit, is go in there and set it up. Like I wound up setting this one up for like 140, I think it was 149 or 146 or something like that for a mash, and then 152 for a mash, and then 170 for a mash out. That way you can just kind of jump into the menu real quick and set it up. There's also a setting in there to adjust the calibration or adjust the temperature setting, the temperature reading. And that is actually, it will allow you to adjust 12 degrees, either negative or positive. So that's something nice. You can adjust that stuff with no problem. Now, for all you data hounds out there, this system does have a USB port on the bottom where you can actually take the entire brew day data and export it as a CSV file. That's a comma separated value, which Excel, either Microsoft Excel or LibreOffice. If you don't want to pay for Microsoft Office, you can use LibreOffice to open that up. I did download the testing period that I did just to kind of see what it looked like. One of the interesting things that I did note on there was that the mash does not show what percentage the element was. I'm assuming it's set at 100% all the time. That was the other thing that I didn't see any settings for, which might be something that they could upgrade in the future, because it does say that, with the USB port and all that stuff, they would be able to push upgrades out and stuff like that. But there is no adjustment for adjusting the percentage of power used when you're doing the mash. I'm assuming it just stays at 100%. Now, it did show on the graph or on the spreadsheet that I downloaded, the CSV, it did show the boil percentages. So like as it was heating up from 170 to boil, it showed 100%, and then when I backed it off, it showed that adjustment. But it does hit pretty good data points, and you can make a graph and all that stuff. So if you're a data hound and you like to record every single aspect of your brew day, you can certainly download what occurred. It also does have a timer on there to show, like, I'm pretty sure when you hit start brew, I think the timer starts. There's a little timer down in the corner of the graph window there. And that shows you kind of like elapsed time over the entire day. It does have a timer on it, so you could put a timer in there for, like boil additions, or if you want to do, if you want to time it to put your immersion chiller in or whatever, it does have a timer on it as well. You're able to adjust that during the brew day, reset it, set it to different numbers and all that stuff. So it's pretty versatile from that standpoint. Now, as far as assembly goes, there's not a whole lot to do. Basically, probably the toughest thing, and what I couldn't even really film it because my arms and everything are so big. When you put the mash basket together, you have to put the recirculation tube as well as one of the, I think it's a 3/4 inch tri-clamp gaskets in the bottom down there, and then get the clamp around and all that stuff. So it's really hard for me to get my arms and everything down in there and kind of get it just right. You might have better success if you lay it on its side. That way you can kind of flip the tri-clamp over top of the the connection there and have it sit a little bit better. But, you know, it was one of those things, I tried to film and I couldn't, I mean, all you could see was my arm. So, you know, it's one of those things where it is what it is. So that is just an assembly for that. And obviously putting the seal in the bottom of the kettle. Then you have to put the silicone seal around the trub or filter screen for the pump. And, you know, once you get that, it's not too hard to put on. You just kind of stretch it and put it on there. Then you can kind of slide that down into the bottom of the kettle. And then one of the things that they did say was make sure that if it's kind of off center a little bit and you can actually see the inlet to the pump, because there's three outlets three inlet outlets in the kettle. One of them's a whirlpool, the center one for the recirculation, and then there's actually a pump inlet also. So there's like 3 holes in the bottom of the kettle. The farthest outside one is the pump inlet. So you just want to make sure when you install that the ring is actually not, the pump inlet is not showing inside of the kettle, you know, outside the ring, if that makes sense. For the knockout hose, basically it's just a 3/8 hose barb with some 3/8 tubing. Got a couple hose clamps if you want to put another connection on the other end of it for going into a fermenter or something like that. Again, it's got that 3/4 inch tri-clamp adapter with the seal and all that stuff. So that's not too big of a deal. One of the things you want to make sure before you fill everything up is that all of the valves are closed, because there's really not an indicator showing that they're open or closed. I mean, you can kind of tell when you have them screwed out, because they screw in, screw out, almost like a water faucet on a hose bib on your house. So you can kind of tell if they're all the way out, but it's hard to tell if they're open just a little bit. So make sure you tighten all those down before you fill it up. Just a word of advice, ask me how I know. Then as far as hooking up the power, this was kind of something that I struggled with just a little bit on it, was hooking up the power cord. There is like an ID, I don't know what it's almost like it's not a pin, but it's almost like there's a shape on the connector on the kettle, and you have to make sure you get it lined up just right with the pin that's on the power cord. Otherwise you'll be struggling with it. I struggled for a little while until I flipped it over, took a look at it, and saw what the issue was, because there's not a lot of times you'll have a slot on. This just has kind of like a real faint V groove, if you will, in the kettle connection, and then that matches to a corresponding piece on the connector for the twist lock, because it goes in and then has a twist lock that locks it into place. As far as the controller goes, not a huge issue with that. It's just like it's an M12. You plug it in, and then you can screw it tight so that it doesn't come undone. So one of the first things that I wanted to check out when I saw the design of it, I was kind of interested in the fact that it had multi-function valve. So when you're doing your mash, you can run the recirculation tube as well as run the whirlpool. That's one of the things with the all-in-one units that have the basket in them. A lot of times you'll find if you pull the basket out and take a look, there's just water or liquid in there. And that's one of the things that, you know, people pick up the basket or whatever. But with this system, like some of the other systems that are out there, you can actually open that whirlpool port just a little bit and recirculate as well as whirlpool at the same time. Now, they don't say anything in the directions about that. It was just something that I wanted to try. So I filled it up with a couple gallons of water, just enough to cover the element. And then I'm going to show you some video here of, you know, testing that. We're running the recirculation port without the basket in, because obviously you couldn't see the whirlpool action if I had the basket in there. But it did work out fine. Didn't see any issues with that. So after I did that little test, I put in the pump filter and seal and everything, installed that in the bottom. Then I installed the basket in there to see how it would do with pumping through the rims, diffuser, and cap. And it did a pretty good job. I mean, you're not going to get, it didn't look like you're going to get a really big fan out of it or anything, but I mean, you don't really have to have a huge amount of flow, just as long as everything is flowing over. I was able also to adjust the whirlpool as well as the recirculation port at the same time and get, you know, still a pretty good recirculation and and I know there was some flowing through the whirlpool as well, because when I pulled the basket out later, it was still circulating in there. So that wasn't a huge issue at all. So once I did that, I wanted to go ahead and fill up the kettle to about 7 gallons to kind of simulate a mash in, and then see, you know, how the pump and all that stuff performed. Same deal, no problem at all with that as far as performance goes. I was able to do the whirlpool and everything again. So once I did that, I wanted to perform a test to see how quickly it would heat up water from ground temperature, which I think right now is like 65 degrees at my house. I wanted to see how it would heat that up to like 158 degrees, which is it's kind of a normal mash in temperature, maybe a little bit high, but I wanted to see how quickly it would do that. And it heated, it took about 28 minutes or so. And one of the things, it's a PID based controller, and one of the things that PIDs will do is they'll try to keep from overshooting temperature. So when it got to 155 degrees, it actually kind of tapered off a little bit, as you can kind of see on the graph on the controller. And then it just started kind of bumping up the temperature. So it was right around the 30-minute mark that it actually hit 158. And then, so after I did that, I took the basket out and then drained a little bit off. It had just about right around just under 6 gallons, probably like 5.8 or 9 gallons, something like that. I over drained it a little bit, but it wasn't a big deal. So then I wanted to take it, because I raised the temperature to mash out temperature, which would be 170. I raised it up before I took the basket out. And then from there, I set a timer to see how quickly from 170 it would get to boil. And right around the 9-minute or so mark, I started getting some pretty good bubbling, and you know, it was getting up in the mid to upper 200s, starting to see a pretty good roll on the boil. And then from there, it was about 10 minutes or so, it hit a full nice rolling boil. It was fogging up my camera and everything else. But I was able to back it off to about 80% and still get a pretty good boil and everything with it. So what are my initial impressions? One of the things that I did notice immediately whenever I got out of the box was how thick and sturdy the kettle is. I mean, it's not like some of the other lower cost all-in-one systems. It definitely is like a heavy duty, what you would find on a standard, you know, SS Brewtech kettle. So the mash basket is very thick gauge stainless steel, as well as the kettle itself is also thick steel. It is heavy. It does have a fan that runs inside. It's not super loud. I'll show you some footage here of, you know, just basically in the basement with ambient noise, and then I'll click it on, and then you'll get to see how loud it is. I think it was like 40 something decibels, which is not, I mean, you know, me talking to the camera right now is more than 40 decibels. So it's not really annoying, but it stays on the entire time you brew, just to let you know. So as long as the unit's on, the fan is on. There are a couple of other things that are kind of minor little quirks, but I think they're worth pointing out at least. One of the things is how much, I think this kettle is like 15 inches or so wide, something like that. But one of the things that I did notice, that when you have the cord plugged in the back, it does stick out quite a ways, probably another good 6 or 8 inches. So just something to be aware of if you're looking at like purchasing this unit, you want to put it on a brew stand or whatever, up against the wall. That is something that you want to be aware of, because it does stick out quite a ways. The other thing is, I do like the fact that the controller is kind of separate, but the other issue that you have with it being separate is the kettle is actually a little bit taller, and with the height being what it is, I really had a hard time getting the kettle up out of the basket up out of the kettle, sitting on my brew bench. And so it kind of leads me to believe that I probably want to do it on like a lower stand. But then if I do it on a lower stand, where am I going to put the controller? On the floor? I don't really want to put it on top of the kettle. You can kind of hang it off of the front handle. Might be a little bit haphazard, but it's just one of those other little quirky things I just wanted to kind of point out, that there really is no place. I wish they would have maybe made something so you could hang it from the kettle, like the handle or something like that. You can kind of do it makeshift, but it's not really designed for that. So that's just the only other thing. I will know more once I get a brew day on it, but as far as, you know, holding temperatures and everything, for what little time period I ran it for, it seemed like it was holding temperatures pretty good. So that's encouraging. But I'll definitely know more once I get a batch of beer brewed through it, and then I'll be able to give you a little bit more of an opinion. But I just want to kind of give you this first look, first impression, so you can kind of see what it is, what it comes with, what my initial thoughts are, how the system works, and all that stuff. So thanks for watching. This has been Brian for Short Circuited Brewers. We'll see you on the next video.